If you had to live off your pantry starting tomorrow, not for a few days, but for months, would you actually feel good about everything in it? Because I had to ask myself that recently, and it led me to start removing some pretty common items from my own home. Things I used every single day and never questioned. And one of these I almost guarantee you have right now. Hey, it's Jara with Wicked Prepared. If you're new here, this channel is all about helping you get prepared in a way that actually works in real life without overwhelm and without wasting money. I'm a huge proponent of storing what you use and using what you store. If I'm putting something away for long-term storage, I want it to be something that I feel good about using right now, not something that I would only touch in a worst case scenario. Rotation and actually using what you store is one of the most important practices in preparedness. It gives you real experience and it keeps everything fresh and reliable. And yes, a lot of us are preparing for worst case scenarios, things like major disasters or long-term grid down situations. But in doing that, we're also preparing for the things that are far more likely to happen: power outages, storms, shortages, job loss, economic downturn, times where you may need to rely on what you have, but life isn't over. Life is still happening. And that brings me to something that I don't hear talked about really enough in the prepper space. One of the most important elements of being prepared is your physical health. Your strength, your energy, your capacity, your resilience. These are survival tools, because when resources are limited and physical demands are higher, your body is what carries you through it. And a healthy body doesn't just happen by accident. It starts with your environment. It starts with what you're eating, what you're using in your home, and what you're exposed to every single day. All right, let's get into it. These are the items I've been removing from my pantry and from my home, and why I'm no longer comfortable keeping them as part of my long-term plan, nor using them in my everyday life. First up is non-stick cooking spray. Like most people, for years, I thought it was harmless. I thought it was great, just a quick, convenient cooking tool. It's relatively shelf stable, so I had a good 2-year supply that I had been rotating through. But when you actually look into what's inside that can, you realize you're not just adding oil to your food or your pan, you're adding propellants, additives, and chemicals that don't really serve a purpose nutritionally. That's when I realized it didn't belong in my long-term plan or in my cabinet right here behind me. So I replaced it with simple, stable fats like olive oil, coconut oil, avocado oil, and other options that actually support nutrition instead of just convenience. And I got these nifty sprayers that I've been obsessed with. That way I keep the convenience of being able to spray, but I eliminate all of those risks that come with commercially available sprays. Next up is toothpaste. Yes, I'm still brushing my teeth, but I'm talking about big brand toothpaste. This is something that doesn't get talked about much in the prepper space. This is one of those products we use every single day without even thinking about it, because it's just part of your normal routine. You wake up, you brush your teeth, done, on with your day. I had stocked up on toothpaste the same way I stocked up on everything else. It made sense. It's shelf stable. We use it every day, and we definitely wouldn't want to run out of it in any kind of emergency. But when I started looking into this toothpaste I was buying, I realized something that made me pause. Toothpaste is not designed to be ingested, and yet small amounts of it inevitably are every single day, especially by kids. When you look at what's actually in a lot of conventional toothpaste, you start to see a pattern. Go look at the warning labels on the toothpaste you're probably using right now. Look at the ingredients. You'll probably see things like sodium lauryl sulfate, which is a foaming agent. It's what makes your toothpaste get all foamy when you brush, but it doesn't actually help your teeth. It just makes it feel like it's working. Incidentally, it's the same foaming ingredient used in things like laundry detergent and dish soap, which is another place that I'm making improvements in our household. I'll touch on that more later. The sodium lauryl sulfate is a known irritant that's often derived from petroleum and processed chemically. It's bad enough on your skin, but it's worse in your mouth, which is highly absorbent tissues. Then you've got ingredients like titanium dioxide, which is literally just there to make the toothpaste look white. It doesn't help your teeth. The European Union banned titanium dioxide in 2022 due to uncertainty around safety when ingested, mostly because of particle accumulation in our bodies over time and because of concerns that it has the potential to damage DNA. And remember, these are all in a product that most people use multiple times a day, every day of their lives. This next one is where things really started to add up for me. With this next one, you might not think of it as having a great alternative. A lot of people, including myself, want safer, better options, but we still want products that are effective. So there's some middle ground there. where it doesn't have to be full of toxic chemicals, but it's also not some watered down product that doesn't really actually do anything. Because at the end of the day, if a product doesn't work, you're not going to stick with using it. But if you don't feel good about what's in it, you're always going to question it. And you may pay for it later when it's too late. When you start thinking about your pantry and your home that way, that's when things really begin to shift. What I'm talking about here is cleaning products, specifically things like bleach sprays and harsh chemical cleaners. We all learned the hard way during the pandemic and the resulting supply chain crisis in 2020 why we need to include a stockpile of cleaning supplies in our prepper pantry. And disinfection matters, especially in an emergency. But what I started thinking about was the environment that I'm creating inside my home. This is something that I didn't think about much for a very long time because cleaning is just kind of part of life. It's routine. And we think of clean as being good and healthy, but how we get there matters, because I started paying attention to how my body reacts when I was cleaning with the products I was using. You know, you spray something and almost immediately your eyes start burning, your throat gets irritated, you start coughing, your nose starts running. Sometimes I've even become physically ill from breathing in cleaners, especially in a confined space like a bathroom. Our bodies react this way, yet we just push through it like it's normal. But it's not. That's your body reacting to what you're breathing in. And if you're in a smaller or more confined space, that exposure builds up fast. Your body doesn't react like this for no reason. That's your body trying to protect you by expelling those toxins from your lungs and from your body. So I started asking myself, if my body's reacting like that in the moment, what does repeated exposure look like over time? And that really concerned me. I experimented with homemade cleaners, but I was never truly satisfied with the results. That's when I started shifting just towards that middle ground, cleaning products that still work, but don't fill the air with those same harsh fumes. Products without chlorine, ammonia, formaldehyde, harsh disinfectants, things like that. A bunch of these type of products, like the cleaning products, the toothpaste, laundry detergent, things like that, I've been getting through my Shop a Better Way shop club for the last few years. I'm going to talk more about that later in the video, and I'll get some links below, but it's really nice because it's made it a whole lot easier for me to find better options all in one place without having to dig around everywhere. And another really nice benefit of swapping over is that a lot of the cleaning products that I'm using now and stockpiling now are extremely concentrated, so that a small bottle is equivalent to a large jug or multiple bottles of the stuff that I used to use. So I can now store more cleaning power in less space, and I don't have to tell you how valuable shelf space is when you're trying to stock up for emergencies. It's pretty interesting that most of the big brand laundry detergents are like 50 to 80% water. So you're paying for water, and that water is taking up space on your shelf. I'll take the concentrated, add your own water products any day. But the one thing that made me stop and really rethink everything was this next one, plastics, specifically around foods. And this was a big shift for me because plastic is everywhere and it's easy. But over time, especially with heat and reheating, plastic components, including chemicals and microplastics, can start to leach into your food. And if your pantry is something that you're relying on long-term, that exposure adds up. Most of us have so much plasticware that we've built up over the years that replacing it all at once would cost a small fortune, which most of us don't have. So instead of trying to overhaul everything all at once, I've just been slowly replacing plastic with things like glass and stainless steel. The key here is to start with the most important items. And this is usually going to be plastic that is going to undergo heating, and thin, flexible plastics like disposable water bottles. So think like your Tupperware style containers, for instance, that you might reheat leftovers in or put hot food into. I started purchasing glass containers, and once I built up a decent supply, I moved my plastics to the back room. I still have them for now. They're there just in case I need an extra container, but they are much less frequently used, and hopefully they're going to be able to be chucked pretty soon when I finally realize that I'm not reaching for them at all anymore. So just buying one or two less toxic containers at a time will add up over time, just like everything else. And look around at things that you already have, like glass mason jars, for instance, that most of us have that could be pulled into service to store some kinds of leftovers. Another thing we've done is we've also greatly reduced our plastic water bottle use and storage, the disposable bottles. That thin, crinkly plastic is one of the worst offenders for microplastics and chemicals because it's one of the least stable plastics and it's not designed for durability. I'm going to say something important here that really applies to pretty much everything on this list, and that's something that we should apply to everything in our lives, really. The terms generally considered safe and approved don't necessarily mean that they're ideal for repeated exposure over time. Cutting down can make a big difference, even if you can't cut something out completely. To begin to replace those disposable water bottles, we've done two main things. We've invested in reusable water bottles that we actually enjoy using, even if that meant paying a little bit more. Ones that are stainless steel on the inside. We've replaced as many plastic parts that they have as possible, like the straw on those bottles with stainless steel parts. You can even go one step further and use a mason jar. Add a stainless steel drinking lid and a silicone outer sleeve for breakage control and a little bit of insulation. And you've got a much less toxic and more environmentally friendly option for your daily hydration on the go. Run your water through a good water filter that will remove chemicals and microplastics, and you're good to go. You may spend a bit up front on those items, but in the long run, you're going to actually save money by not buying disposables over and over again, and your health will thank you. Now, these are great solutions for everyday use, but stockpiling cases of those crinkly water bottles was also part of our emergency water storage plan, which is still a crucial thing to have. And we had to use them because they start leaking after a year or two, so you can't just stockpile them forever. We solved that by starting to swap out those cases with cases of long-term emergency water. These are packaged in a high-density plastic that's designed for long-term storage. It's very stable, and it's not a big contributor to microplastics and chemical leaching like the other plastics I've mentioned. When a situation arises where we need to use them, I know I could run the water through my filter if I was worried about the plastic, but my research tells me I wouldn't have to with these. As an added bonus, I don't have to worry about rotation as much either because these will not leak over time like the other bottles. The same holds true for our long-term food storage materials, things like Mylar bags and food-grade buckets. These are highly stable materials with very low migration into foods, especially when care is taken to keep them out of high heat environments, which we should do anyways for the sake of the food that's within them. There's a much higher risk of chemical and microplastic exposure from grocery store packaging than from those long-term storage containers. And we've taken a bite out of that by ordering more bulk goods from Azure Standard, which often come in heavy paper sacks rather than grocery store plastics. This isn't about perfection. It's about making better choices over time. But it does take time and money to swap over entirely. I still have plastic spatulas I just can't bring myself to toss until I get a few more safer options. I still have my plastic canisters for a lot of my stored food because I have a ton of them, and the glass ones, the nice glass ones, are just so darn expensive. But like I said, it is much more important to swap out the containers that are heated, so my focus starts there. One thing that surprised me the most, and almost nobody talks about, I'm going to talk about in just a minute, but before I get there, dryer sheets. Okay, this may not be technically a prepper thing, but we've got to take care of ourselves today, even if the zombies aren't knocking on our door quite yet. And experience tells us that emergencies can be supply chain shortages just as much as power outages. Dryer sheets were a big one for me because they seem completely harmless. And for me, I'm a big smells person. I love scents, and I never imagined that they could be harmful. But when you look into dryer sheets, they're pretty darn terrible, to be honest. Most are loaded with synthetic fragrances and coating agents that don't just rinse away. They stay in your clothes. That's the whole point, which means they contact your skin all day long. Of course, our skin is our largest organ, and it absorbs a lot of what we put onto it. I hate to keep going back to laundry detergent, but think about it. I used to wash our clothes with big brand detergents that were full of surfactants, phosphates, formaldehyde, parabens, and I struggle with some of these words, so bear with me, but phthalates and quaternary ammonium compounds, things like that. And then we take those clothes that we just cleaned with those items and we put them right into the dryer with dryer sheets that have a lot of the same ingredients. When you pull your clothes out of the dryer, do they still smell a little bit like the detergent you used? Of course they do. And that means that some of those chemicals are always in your fabric. So we're wearing clothing that still contains those chemicals. And when we take a shower, we dry ourselves off with towels that still contain chemicals. And we go to bed in bedding that still has those chemicals. We do this every single day. It's on our skin and we're inhaling it. We never get a break from it ever. A lot of those ingredients that I just mentioned are not just skin and respiratory irritants. Some are also carcinogens or hormone disruptors. So no bueno, and not something that we want to be surrounding ourselves with. Those harmful ingredients that I just talked about, they can be found in lots of things in our homes. But dryer sheets are even worse because not only can they contain those harmful chemicals, but the sheet themselves are also a major contributor to microplastics in our environment. Because they're made of polyester or nylon and then they're thrown into a high heat drum, they're tumbled around and around, the chemicals and microplastics that are created and released are then blown out into the air through the dryer vent, and what isn't settles back into the clothing. That's when I started to question it, because this isn't occasional exposure. This is constant. So I removed dryer sheets altogether. I replaced them with better options. What are some better options, you may ask? Liquid fabric softeners in the washer. They cut out the polyester sheet in the dryer, but you still have to be careful and check for all of those ingredients that I mentioned earlier. And I still feel like I want or need something in the dryer. Of course, some people air dry their clothes and they enjoy the smell and the feel of the air dried fabrics, but not everyone has the time, the space, or the climate to do that, at least not all the time. So I started using wool dryer balls in my dryer in place of the sheets. These soften your laundry and reduce static, just like the dryer sheets do, but they actually have many more added benefits as well. They toss through the laundry as it tumbles, so they prevent wrinkles, and they actually make your laundry dry much faster, which is going to save you on your electric bill or your gas bill, whatever kind of dryer you have. And you can even put a drop of essential oil on them if you're a scent lover like me. If you're allergic to wool, there are bamboo and hemp dryer balls out there that I found as well. I'll try to link to some of those options down below. This may be a small change, but it removes something toxic that we're exposed to every day. The next swap that I want to talk about is low quality cookware, especially scratched up nonstick pans and cheap coatings that break down over time. If you're using these every day, that is something worth paying attention to. Teflon is the brand name of nonstick coating. It's a synthetic coating, and while it's considered safe when used properly, remember what I said about that, considered safe, it does come with some limitations that a lot of people don't think about or realize. Personally, I didn't realize or understand all of this until a couple of years ago, so don't feel bad if this is the first time you're hearing of it. Teflon doesn't handle high heat very well, which of course is an issue in a cookware, especially if you're considering cooking during an emergency, when it can be even harder to regulate temperature on your emergency stove. When Teflon gets too hot, when it gets overheated, it can start to break down and release dangerous fumes, which isn't something that you want happening in your kitchen, especially if it's a smaller or enclosed space. Not only can it cause flu-like symptoms in humans, but it's extremely toxic to pets and small animals. It causes lung damage, and it can even cause instant death in birds if you happen to have a pet bird. It's also a surface that wears down over time. It gets scratched, it degrades, and once that coating starts breaking down, you're not really cooking on the same surface anymore. The bits of nonstick coating begin to separate from the metal, and before you know it, you're eating Teflon. So instead of constantly replacing nonstick pans and having to worry about overheating them, I started moving towards things like cast iron, stainless steel, and ceramic coated pans. Ceramic coated pans have a similar nonstick performance like Teflon, but they're much safer. And I have heard that they're not quite as durable over time, but I haven't really had any issues with mine so far. And I do like that coating. But cast iron and stainless steel really are the way to go if you're looking for durability. They take a little bit of getting used to if you're used to using the nonstick coatings, but they last, they're durable, and they don't rely on a coating that can wear off over time or become dangerous. And again, this isn't about saying something is bad or unsafe. It's about asking, does it really make sense to be using this when there are safer alternatives? And for me, this was one of those things that didn't make sense anymore. Again, this is something that you may have to swap over time. That's what I've been doing myself. A new pan here and there when they're on sale or something like that. Even if you find the color that nobody else wants, it can save you a little bit if you don't care about having mismatched pots and pans, which I don't really. But just gradually swap over and you'll at least be heading in the right direction. Next up, this is more of an entire category of things that I'm choosing better options for. Things we put on our skin and our hair: soap, shampoo, lotion, deodorant, sunscreen, even makeup. Specifically, any product that contains parabens. There are ongoing discussions and research around how parabens interact with hormones in the body. Some studies suggest that they are endocrine disrupting chemicals that mimic estrogen in the body, potentially increasing breast cancer risk, affecting your reproductive health. I'm not going to get too far into all that scientific stuff, but suffice to say, the jury is still out, and I just feel better reducing that exposure where I can. So for me, this became less about any single product and more about overall exposure. Because it's not just one thing. It's your shampoo, it's your lotion, your deodorant, your sunscreen. All of that exposure adds up over time. So I've been slowly replacing those with alternatives as I run out. Not all at once, just gradually. Again, not perfection, just progress. And lastly, something that I once could have never imagined being without, but in the last couple of years I've been moving away from, and that's aluminum, and most specifically aluminum foil. This is one of those things that's been around forever, so most of us don't even question it. We use it for cooking, wrapping food, covering leftovers. It's just standard in most kitchens. But when you really think about how it's used, especially with heat, with acidic foods, that's where it made me pause, because aluminum can transfer into food under certain conditions, especially when you're cooking at high temperatures or using things like tomato sauce, citrus, anything acidic. So instead of relying on foil for everything, I started switching to parchment paper for a lot of my cooking. It still gives you that nonstick surface, helps keep your pans clean. It's easy to use, easy to stock up on, and it doesn't have the same concerns when it comes to direct contact with your food. I still keep some foil on hand. I'm not eliminating it completely because, to be honest, I've got a ton of it stocked up that I can't just bring myself to throw away. I hate waste, but I use it sparingly and with discretion. For instance, I cover a pan of cold food where it's not even really touching the food, rather than lining a baking dish and then baking, things like that. I'm just being more intentional and more aware about when and how I use it. And as a result, I'm using a lot less. And like everything else in this video, it's not about perfection. It's about making better choices where it makes sense, one small step at a time. Now, let's come back to that mistake I mentioned earlier. Most people focus entirely on quantity, having more, stocking more, stacking more, but they don't stop to think about what they're actually storing. And over time, that creates a pantry that looks prepared, but doesn't truly support short-term or long-term health. Preparedness isn't just about getting through something, it's about staying strong while you're going through it. Most people think preparedness is about having more than everyone else, but real preparedness is about being intentional and trusting what you already have. Here's how I want you to think about this moving forward. You don't need to throw everything out today. You don't need to spend a bunch of money, and you absolutely, definitely don't need to be perfect. You're already ahead of most people just by thinking about this. What matters is progress. Focus on what you use the most, because that's going to have the biggest impact. Every time something runs out or wears out, replace it with something better. One decision at a time, one swap at a time, and gradually you'll build a pantry that not only supports your family long term, but also keeps them happy and healthy right now. I'm curious, what's one thing in your house right now that you're starting to question? Not even remove yet, just question, even just a little. Drop it in the comments, because I think it's a conversation that more people need to be having. And if you want to see what I've personally switched to, I'm going to put some resources down below so you can check that out if you want to. Like I mentioned, the Shop a Better Way Club is one place where I found a lot of these alternatives. This isn't where I get things like cast iron pans or glass containers, but it is where I'm getting a lot of our family's cleaning products, personal care items, vitamins and supplements, and a whole list of things that we buy and run out of every day, consumable items that we actually take into our body where it is most important. This store has something like 500 products. They're all American made, all high quality products that are as good or better as the big name brands that they're replacing, and they're safer. You might think that this would add a lot to the price, but the reality is I'm actually spending less overall than I did when I used to buy all of those items at big box stores. So again, I'm not spending more money, I'm spending my money more wisely, and that's the key. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, leave me an herb emoji down in the comments. And if you're serious about building a smarter, more resilient pantry that actually supports your health and your family, make sure you're subscribed and check out this video next. I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow. We'll see you next time.